news of a scandal has to be some of the worst news you can get. I wish we lived in a world only with good news. No corruption, no abuse, no hidden evil. Potentially the most painful scandals happen in churches. Church is supposed to be the place you go for refuge. Church is supposed to be the place you go for a safe place. Church is supposed to be the place you go to for protection and for love. Any good man, if he had the power, would snap his fingers and fix the issues instantaneously. But it's not that easy. So in this video, I'll share how to scandal-proof your life and explain how you can help others do the same. All right, everybody, let's jump right into the video today. We're jumping in and we're discussing scandal-proofing your life. It's probably one of the most unfortunate parts of being alive is hearing the bad news that somebody did something that they regret or that they hurt other people, and the details come out. It could turn your stomach. It can make you feel sick and disturbed and bothered, and it can certainly, the temptation and tendency for me makes me want to move to a private island and with just my small circle of people, and where we can live lives where we're not corrupted or poisoned by that which is wrong. Yet in reality, it's much more than just running away from the problem. There's a quote, a concept that evil wins when good men do nothing. And while I individually may not be able to help everybody, I could help myself, I could help those people around me. And I wanted to share a few principles along the way. I remember reading in Leadership Gold, one of John Maxwell's book, and he had a chapter that he was the most difficult person he ever led. From a leadership standpoint, his greatest leadership challenge wasn't leading anybody else. It was simply leading himself. That was the challenge. And as I walk through life, and especially as a person of faith, as a person who has the good book as my guide, I use that book to guide my decisions. I do realize it's easier to tell people to pray, and it's more difficult to be devoted to prayer. So I figured we go through a few of these principles. I give you a little bit of insight for your life, and also how you could help extend this to other people. And while you're here, I do want to hear from you as well. Is if somebody came up to you and asked you, and told you they want to live a life of impact, they want to make a positive difference, they want to be a force for good, and they also want to have a scandal-free life, what advice would you give them? What tip would you offer them? What kind of guidance would you provide? I know we could easily say, just don't do stupid stuff. If you didn't do stupid stuff, we wouldn't have scandals. And that seems easy, but that's part of it. Is, when we make this very serious, like when scandals happen, especially in church, people can lose and really damage people's faith. People question their own journey, and they even question like how they could be so foolish to have trusted somebody. Other people are turned off to God. They feel like, all the Christians, because the scandal happened in this Christian church, then maybe all the Christians are bad and all the Christians are evil. And they could maybe group them all in as being complicit. But if I were to start somewhere, I would say, number one, to live a scandal-free life, number one, you understand the levels of darkness in being human. Understand the levels of darkness. What I mean by that is as I've walked through life, the darkest part of people is the most inner part of people. I remember hearing somebody use the expression, and they said, if somebody offered you $1 million and all you had to do was put up on a screen all of the thoughts that you had yesterday, he said nobody would do it. And it was one of those moments I was like, maybe I would. And then you start thinking about the ramifications and who your thoughts would impact and how it would hurt people and what it would reveal about who you are and how you operate. But aside from thoughts, and you have, thoughts are maybe the most evil, and then you get our words or maybe the next evil in line. Some of the things that come out of our mouth, that's some of the evil. And I'll give you a few passages to kind of process this. Let's look at those now as I get those pulled up for us. Let's look over the passage, and we're going to go to Mark chapter 7. Look at a few passages to kind of to make sure we're anchored in the right place. Mark chapter 7. And at the end of this story, Jesus is going to give us some perspective. In verse 21, it says, for it is from within, out of a person's heart, this is it inside, that evil thoughts come. Sexual morality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, and folly. All of these evils come from the inside and defile a person. So, if you understand that, like the levels of evil, that the darkest part of us, the most evil part of us is on the inside, and then we also understand that no person is perfect in what they say. Not on a scripted stream, and I have a few notes to kind of guide my thoughts here, but no one is perfect in what they say. Let's look at that passage. In the book of James, verse 2 tells us, you know what, I'm going to block it a little bit. Let me modify that real quick. All right. There it goes. All right, there you can see it all. All right, let me adjust that and move that one. All right, there we go. Good to go. All right, it tells us we all stumble in many ways. Anyone who is never at fault in what they say is perfect, able to keep their whole body in check. When we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we can turn the whole animal. Or take ships as an example. Although they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are steered by a very small rudder wherever the pilot wants to go. Likewise, the body is a small part, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue is also a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole body, sets the whole course of one's life on fire, and it is itself set on fire by hell, man. So we see that passage, and we see this idea that there is the evil that stirs and comes from us and flows to different parts of our lives. It starts on the inside, yet with nobody being perfect, nobody is flawless in what they say. So to being aware of the layers, the levels of darkness as being a human It's less about the outward behavior. So as you're helping people, the reason, again, we're talking about being scandal free. As you work on your own life, you'll understand that the most evil part of you is the inside, though that your thought life. The next most evil part of you is the words that you speak. And then it's the behavior, then it's the external behaviors. I remember growing up, my mom, she was somebody who she almost lived as though she didn't even believe that evil existed. And there was an innocence about that, yet sometimes she wouldn't lock the door at night. I remember, we had people who would break in and steal, and we wouldn't even wear seatbelts as children. Thank God that we're still alive. You understand what I'm saying? I'm grateful. I'm grateful. But she kind of lived as though it didn't exist. And as I reflect on that time period, and as I think about the situations we're in life, when you have these leaders or people who you respect and hold in high regard, and they have this shortcoming in their life and they fall from grace, and then we can wonder how that happens. Well, we just looked at some of the passages of how that happens. It goes from your words not being checked. Well, hang around people, notice how they speak. You'll get a great perspective about how they think, how honest they are, how much integrity they have, how they pursue being righteous. Doesn't mean they mean perfect, but it means how they respond to challenge, how they respond to difficulty, how they respond to being upset, how they respond to being disappointed. It tells you so much about the human being. What kind of language do they use when things are difficult, when things are stressful? Do they start lying when they don't want to look bad? Do they start boasting to make a small accomplishment seem better? All of these things speak to the character of a human being, and it's important for us to pay attention to the words people use, because the scripture does tell us in Matthew chapter 12 that out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. So think about what's happening in that heart. It'll come out of the lips. And we could count on the inside of people being evil. You got to be mindful of the kind of trust that you give to other people. If you understand the levels of human darkness, nobody's exempt. Nobody's exempt from that. With that said, let's go to point number two. Point number two is don't trust yourself. Don't trust yourself. Let's pull up another passage in the book of Proverbs. And we're going to look at a text here in chapter 28. Chapter 28, verse 26. Tells us, those who trust in themselves are fools, but those who walk in wisdom are kept safe. Those who trust in themselves, they're fools. Those who trust in themselves are fools. Because I'm a coach and I study personal development, and even I pick up books on self-esteem, and I'm gauging how I can use the principles to help me, my family, my friends around me, but also how I can help other people in my teaching or in my coaching, in my writing. And there is a component where learning to trust yourself is beneficial, and I think this is one of those oxymoronic concepts where you have to take the statement. And there is a time to trust yourself. We're not talking about not trusting yourself to be able to pick out the jacket you're wearing, or not trusting yourself to be able to, brush your teeth, right? Like, these are clear things that you trust yourself with. But there's a part of living life in the accountability you set up for yourself is you don't trust yourself. If you understand you're a person who, again, has the evil stirring from the inside of us, like we looked at in from Mark chapter 7. If we understand we could be somebody who has evil that flows from our mouth, as James chapter 3 told us about, then you just know what you're capable of. You're not exempt then from evil. So that gives me a reminder to not trust myself. What does that mean practically? It means having an appropriate amount of distrust for what I'm capable of. So it's important then to have conversations with people in my life of who I'm trying to be in my life. And that's not for them to control me. It's not for them to micromanage me. But their role in my life is to help me be the man that I want to be like. I want to be like Jesus, right? I want to be a man of character. I want to be a man of courage. I want to be a man of integrity. I want to be a man who makes the right decisions even when it's difficult. I want to be the man who steps up and serves people who need the support. Those are all of who I want to be. And if I understand that, then I need to make sure I communicate to the guys in my circle that I need the support. I need the accountability. And I know people need accountability as well. I'm not saying I need to be everybody's accountability partner, because one person can't be everybody's accountability partner. You understand what I'm saying? And I'm not saying every person I meet has to, again, share completely all about their life. That's not even what it is. But if a person doesn't have anybody that disagrees with them, that challenges them, that says, hold on, that pauses them to examine something that came out of their mouth, we all need that. And that's a question, again, if you're trying to, there's two elements of this that I thought about as you're thinking about living a scandal-free life. One way to do that is you have zero impact. Don't do anything. You won't make a mistake, but you won't do anything significant. I think that's kind of an L. That's not the kind of life I want to live. I want to make an impact. And because of that, it's going to cause me to be in situations and settings with people, working with people, serving people. And because of that, doing nothing isn't the solution. It's being the best version I can be. Do what I can with what I have where I am, right? Do what I can with what I have where I am right now. So don't trust yourself. And also, there's an appropriate amount of distrust for people. There was one Jesus. There was one perfect man. And the rest of us are flawed. And to have that sober perspective on that. All right. Point number three is you begin to take every thought captive. Take every thought captive. That's that inside work. Take every thought captive. Let's go look at that text. It's in the book of 2 Corinthians. We'll turn over there. All right, pick it up in verse 3. For though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. And we take captive every thought Every thought. How many? Every thought. Every thought. Every single thought. Every negative thought. Every corrupt thought. Every problematic thought. We take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. Now, in this text, I would like us to camp out here just for a few minutes. And what is this? What are these three verses talking about as you look at them right here? Talking about waging war, weapons. And even as we read that text, and I'll go ahead and just put a little highlight right there. It says, we take every thought captive. When you think about war, with one group of people fighting another group of people, and part of war, if you're overtaking land, is you're taking the people captive and make them obedient to you as they're in captivity. So the captivity on that spiritual side, the captivity on the spiritual side is we take thoughts. Those thoughts that we have that we need to rein in, hold on to, and examine in the light of what the scriptures say. Because again, whenever you have a scandal break out, let's say you have a scandal break out this year, you can be certain it stemmed from a thought that happened, whether it was a week ago, a month ago, a year ago, or a decade ago, or a couple of decades ago. It started on the inside. So whenever it comes to thinking about how to conquer the outside world and how to be victorious, how to have a scandal-free life while making an impact, we take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. So it's worthy of taking the thought and examining the thought and what is this thought and how does this have an impact if this thought stays right here, if this thought seeps in and becomes a belief. Where's the logical conclusion of holding on to this thought, this belief? And it's one of the reasons, because some of you may already know this about me, is if I'm going to take thoughts captive in my life, there's certain things I just can't do. So I'm one of those guys, I can't. To take my thoughts captive, I can't be one of those guys who's on social media scrolling to see what my friends, family, connections are doing. I'm just not one of those guys. It's one thing to use social media for business. But if I'm casually on social media, the envy, it's almost impossible for me to keep envious thoughts captive and obedient. It's like, again, it's just, again, the envy, the lust, I have to, again, it's just, it's so difficult. But if I want those thoughts to be captive, it's something that I just personally have to sacrifice. So I love connecting with people in real life, person to person, voice to voice, or even text to text directly. But I'm not one of those persons that's really going to be following casually following people on social media, because it makes it difficult for me to take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. So I say all this because the challenge before you is to deal with some of your issues at the thought level, and then building the environment as you interact with people, as you engage with them, to serve them and to help them also at the thought level. Of course, you don't have access to their thoughts, but you'll have access to their words. So what I've seen over the years is people will make a decision if they're going to trust me based on how I respond as they tell me about their behaviors, as they hear me listen to their discussion and their speech. So I can create an environment that welcomes them to talk about what's really going on. So again, if somebody ever tells you about a behavior they're involved in, And you could count on whatever's happening on the inside of them is 10 times worse, 15 times worse, 20 times worse. So to make that environment, so when people tell you the real deal, you could actually help them at the thought level, at the belief level, at that level, so that many situations can be avoided. So problematic situations can be avoided. Helping people at the thought level. Let's move to point number 4. Point number 4 is keep track of the more intense situations that you're in. This one, it's relevant, I think, in our day and age. If somebody comes to you with something heavy and you just do not know how you might be responsible for hearing about a situation, if something is, especially if something is serious, I've seen situations where people have been pulled into court rooms and court filings because of something that they were just told. But it's important that if something serious happens, I saw this over at Nationwide, is if somebody, when I was working in the call center, if somebody was avoiding calls, for example, and they were just hanging up on customers, sad, but it did happen. And then I would pull up a variety of data in the support of their termination, right? Because they were just neglecting the main duty of their job. In other situations, when people were absent excessively, it was a holistic approach. You look at their absences, you look at their quality, you look at their speed, you look at their punctuality. You're looking at all of these factors to make a decision if somebody is going to retain their employment. And I remember in the beginning of coaching people and holding people accountable to certain expectations of the company, sometimes putting in the notes for the coaching session seems overly tedious. Why do I got to do all that? It's a waste of time. Don't you just care if I help the people get to one level to the next? But sometimes people don't get better. Sometimes people don't move from where they are to where they should be. And that holistic perspective is really helpful. So when somebody tells you serious things, and you, at times, depending on the situation, especially those of us who are in counseling, coaching situations, sometimes that record really comes back to be able to help serve you. Not just talking about termination, but understanding if somebody told you, again, personal, private information that you need to go to a certain authorities with, then it's important that you actually know what was told to you, and then you know what actions you took, because you don't want that to come back to you years later and have a negative impact on your life because you were careless with very deep personal information that you were exposed to. So keeping track of these situations, huge. I remember one time I was sitting with one of my mentors and he had his legal pad and we were discussing, and I asked if I could see his legal pad for some of his notes or from some of what he had been reading. And he told me, no, I couldn't. And the reason is because his notes also had details about personal people's lives, because he was keeping a record of things that were happening in these personal, sometimes disturbing situations. I don't have a verse, I don't have a scripture for you on that. I just know it's a practical principle that if people practice, then it can help them avoid problems, big picture. All right, let's bring it into point number 5. How to have a scandal-free life is don't put yourself in questionable situations. Don't put yourself in questionable situations. Let's look at Proverbs chapter 6. Not a Proverbs today. Proverbs chapter 6, we're going to look at verse 27 and 28. Tells us, can a man scoop fire into his lap without his clothes being burned? Can a man walk on hot coals without his feet being scorched? And the answer to that Rhetorical question is maybe. Maybe somebody can have fire scooped into their lap without their clothes being burned. Maybe. But why would you want to? Why would you want to be in a situation where your clothes are being burned? I'm not Tony Robbins, but like, well, why would you want to walk on hot coals? I mean, the expectation eventually, your feet are going to be scorched. And I may not be the one who's laughing, but somebody laughing at that situation. So I remember when we were doing our virtual teams when I was working at Nationwide, and we were going to each associate's home to set up to make sure their computer was up to speed, they had their internet speed, their computers were good to go, their entire system was set up. I remember we didn't go, by ourselves. Two of us went together to make sure we weren't, again, in weird, questionable situations. In the church world, there's I think that's picking up a little bit of credibility, it's called the Billy Graham rule. There's a whole Wikipedia page on this thing. So we'll look at that real quick. It's a Wikipedia page. Billy Graham principle. Pretty sure I spelled that wrong, but Google could correct me. The Billy Graham rule. Let's go and take a look at this. I haven't read this, so this is a blind read. So give me grace if there's anything that I'm not with. So let's take a look here, and looks like I'm blocking it once again. Give me a second. I'll move this. And there we go. All right, let's read some of this. The Modesto Manifesto. Dang. Guess it got a little rhyme and rhythm to it as well. Or Billy Graham rule is a code of conduct among men in which they avoid spending time alone with women to who they are not married. It is adopted as a display of integrity, a means of avoiding sexual temptation, to avoid any appearance of doing something considered morally objectionable, as well as for avoiding being accused of sexual harassment or assaults. Dang, we won't even read the rest of it. That was good. I mean, again, somebody who has passed away, but his legacy lives on as far as how he carried himself when it came to women. He just took that serious. He said, I don't want to be in that situation. I don't want to be in a situation where somebody could look in and go, hey, what was happening over there? And so as you have these conversations with people and you process some of these things, and this last one is, there's going to be situations that aren't wrong and that aren't explicitly evil, but there are situations just to avoid so you don't get even caught up or even accused of something in a setting that you don't want to be involved in. So to bring this in for a landing, my hope, especially in the church world, especially among believers as Christians, that we're just proactive, that we use the guidance the scriptures give us when it comes to understanding how evil works, when it comes to understanding not putting ourselves in a situation, when it comes to understanding that we're supposed to be dealing with our issues at the thought level and for sure the word level, being mindful of the words that we're speaking, but to really gauge that and ensure that we're scandal free and then we're doing our best to help those around us to become mature, to cultivate character that glorifies God it makes the best possible difference in this life. But let me know what you think. Let me know what you would tell somebody if you're trying to help them navigate and live a life of impact while avoiding scandals, avoiding the problems that so many people fall into. Let me know what you think. We'll see you on tomorrow's video. Peace.